Chapter 10, Part 2. We're now going to look at exchange of non-monetary assets for other assets. So, we looked at the first three already in Part 1, and now we're going to look at exchanges of non-monetary assets. So, we're going to go over the rules. Ordinary accounted for on the basis of the fair value of the asset given up or the fair value of the asset received, whichever is clearly evident. And then we look at something called commercial substance, i.e., old equipment for new equipment. That does affect the revenue stream. Now, that means it has commercial substance, which means we recognize the gain or loss when we do the exchange. Now, what happens if they exchange an old truck for another old truck, which seldom ever happens? Then you have to defer the gain. So now we'll walk through 3 examples. All right, but before we do that, these are the steps. This is new. This is new in this book. And what they do is they go through the 4 steps of how you're supposed to do the journal so you get it correct, because sometimes this can be a little tricky. So what they say they want you to do first is record the new asset at fair value. Now, what's fair value? It's the fair value is determined based on the fair value of the asset given up or the fair value of the asset received modified by any cash. In a normal exchange, we expect these 2 fair values to be equal. 2, we then remove the book value of the non-monetary asset. You mean you're going to have to take the cost plus the accumulated depreciation off the books. Next, you're going to record any cash received or cash paid. Now, this is always used to equalize the fair value. And then last, we're going to recognize a gain or loss if it has commercial substance. Now, here's the thing. They say it's a plug, but my feeling is you always want to work through how you get there and then see if you get the same answer to make sure you did it right, which means it is going to be the difference between the fair value and the book value of the asset given up in step 2. If the fair value is greater, then a gain is recorded. If the book value is greater, then a loss is recorded. So now we'll walk through looking at this from both sides and see how we do the journal. All right, Danny Company exchanged a building that had a fair value of $1.4 million and a net book value of $800,000 for a building owned by Mike with a book value of $950 plus received $140,000 from Mike's company. The transaction had commercial substance. So let's see how we do this. First thing we got to do is figure out what's the value of the new building for Danny. So the building has a fair market value of $1.4, but Danny also received $140,000. So what that tells us is the new building is really only worth $1.26. Now we're going to, since all we have is the fair value of what was given up less the cash, we have to use that number. Next, we're going to take the old building off our books. We're going to book the cash. And then we're going to get gain on exchange. Now, the gain on exchange is actually the difference between the fair value and the book value. So that's another way of getting at the same number. And if you notice, by doing that, we still have the same number, so we know we did it right. Now, let's take a look on Mike's books and see what this looks like. All right, here's Mike. What did he do first? He's got to figure out what's the value of the new building. $1.4 million. Now he has to take his old building off the books. Book the cash, and now we can determine the gain. All right. Now, I'm going to show you another way of getting that 310 gain to make sure you did it correctly on the next one, when we're going to look at a problem that lacks commercial substance, which means we have to defer the gain. So, we're doing Mike's books, and the first thing we got to figure out is what is the gain. So, it's the fair value of what was given up, which was $950 plus cash, minus the fair value of what was received, which means we had a gain of 310. So what does it look like on Mike's books? The gain cannot be recognized, so what we have to do is adjust the 1.4 by the 310. We're going to take the old equipment off the books, and we're going to book the cash. And that concludes this part 2 of a non-monetary exchange.